Welcome to this episode of the Birth Without Pain podcast. I'm Cooke. I'm a certified doula and a mom of soon to be 5. And so this episode we're going to talk about asking God to direct you during labor and birth. So we'll talk about going to God during labor and birth for guidance on what position to get into or anything you may need brought to your mind in the moment. So maybe you're a little worried, like, how am I going to know what position I need to get into, what's best for my baby to come down, what's best for my baby to come out. And that can be overwhelming when you're trying to think of all that. And when you start looking into different positions, for labor and for birth, and you're trying to memorize everything so you'll know, like for when the time comes, it can be overwhelming because there's so many different things to think about. And, you have to think if your baby is coming out, forwards or backwards, different. There's a lot of medical terminology there, but I prefer to talk to you just like you, not that you don't. It's beneficial, I guess, to know those things. That way, if you're midwife or if you end up at the hospital, you know what they're talking about when they use words like posterior, anterior, all of those different types of words. But for just a conversation like this, I would rather just say, okay, your baby is facing forward or facing backwards, things like that. It's easier to just comprehend those things in the moment. And so it's easy to get overwhelmed when you start thinking of all of those things because there's so much information out there. Now, those things are important because you want it to be the best, position for your baby to come down and out in the easiest way. But you don't have to get caught up in all of that and get overwhelmed and stressed about it. So if you're in labor and your midwife or doctor talks about, your baby is in a different position than what they would like them to be in, it can become very stressful quickly. And so just know that you can go to God and ask Him for His guidance because ultimately He knows what's best. So, for my story specifically, I had my 4th baby at home, and that was after 3 traumatic births of my first 3 children, and very painful. 2 in the hospital and 1 at a birth center, and then my 4th was at home with a midwife. And so my midwife didn't arrive because I didn't call her soon enough until after the baby was born. And so she had an assistant or 2 assistants who showed up right before the baby was born. But I say all that to say I did not memorize all of these positions. And really, all I did was ask God to guide me when labor started. And basically, I guess I didn't really know how far along, how close I was to actually my baby, coming out, because I sat in the same position, which is not really recommended. You should have some movement and move around. Try to change a position, every hour. But for me, I was in my birth pool for about 2 hours probably, and I just really sat in the same position. I was like, this is working for me. I'm not feeling any pain, and I'm comfortable, I'm relaxed, the water feels good, and it's not even really recommended to be in the water that long because the whole point of the water is to minimize pain, and it does that through the heat. And so if you're sitting in it, your body's used to that heat and it's not really doing, its job as well. But when you're having a supernatural, pain-free birth through God's abilities and His strength and not your own, then things happen that aren't, explained in this earth realm. So although that water and me sitting in it for so long and in the same position shouldn't have really been the optimal position for me to be in for my baby to come down and out so easily, but it happened. So, I didn't memorize all of these birth positions and stuff before that. I kind of went into it pretty naive. And I was just well, I'm going to have a midwife there. Maybe she'll be able to help me if I get into that situation. I didn't even ask her. And so I say all that to say you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know it all to be able to achieve the birth of your dreams. So know that God created your body to have your baby with ease. Okay? And interventions are usually what messes things up for us. Okay, so at the hospital, you're not able to have your baby most of the time the way that God intended it to be. Okay, you're going to be interrupted constantly. You're going to be asked questions. The thing that I hated like the most, probably one of the things I hated the most about hospital birth in my experience, was me being in labor and having pain with contractions and them asking me a bunch of insurance questions and things that I have already answered a million times, like at the doctor's office, which is connected to the hospital. And so I'm like, you should have this information already. And so there are a lot of, that's not necessarily an intervention as much as an interruption, but there's a lot of like protocol, routine interventions that they do while you're in labor, such as like continuous fetal monitoring, which is wrapped around your belly and you can't move usually if it's connected to the machine. And so things like that are disturbing your birth, and it's not the way God designed it to be. He didn't design it for you to, number one, be stuck to a bed. For number two, for you to be pushing on your back. Whenever He created gravity, the same gravity that helps your baby come down, which makes sense for you to be on your knees or standing up and things like that during labor and birth. So my advice is to practice a few labor positions that feel the best to you, that you think will, be the ones that are your go-tos during your actual labor and birth. And so this is something I go over in the Birth Without Pain course that I created to help prepare you for these things without overwhelming you with a bunch of information you don't need, and that's not going to really be helpful in the moment. And so you can find that at sierracooke.com, more information about the course. And then having knowledge of natural birth and positions, it definitely does help you, but even if you don't have it, God can still guide you. So keep that in mind. Don't freak out if you get in the moment and you're like, my mind is blank. All I can think of is just like focusing on my contractions and surrendering and breathing. And I forgot everything that I've learned this entire time. So don't freak out about that. Now, you can do things to help remind you of these. Like you can write different positions on birth cards. So you could just glance at your birth card, your note card, and be like, oh yeah, that's the position I wanted to be in. I totally forgot. But also, God can bring something to your mind. Okay, ask Him, remind me, Lord. If you start to feel like, for example, if you're going for a pain-free birth and you start to feel a little pain, you can stop and say, God, seek first His kingdom, seek first Him. God, what do I need to do? I'm feeling a little pain. I don't want this pain. What do I need to do? Reveal to me if I need to change positions. Reveal to me if I need to rebuke fear. Like, give me guidance, and He'll show up for you. And so remember to acknowledge that God is your ultimate source and strength. Your midwife, your doctor is not your ultimate source. They have some knowledge for you that can help you, to get in different positions and things like that. But ultimately, it's God. So go to Him. Don't skip that part. And that could look something like I said, just praying, God, you are my provider. You are the one who gives me knowledge, wisdom. You have all the answers here. I want the answer from you. And even if this is an emergency situation, like the emotions are going to be running high, your doctor, your midwife is going to be making a lot of decisions, maybe even for you. They're supposed to consent with you still. But even in those moments of like emergency situation, a quick prayer of like, God, guide me. What do? I need your guidance. What is your wisdom on the subject? He knows the outcome already. Your midwife, your provider, they don't know the outcome yet. They don't know what's next, but He does. So go to Him. And that's not to say like, oh, well, let yourself, bleed out for a long time before you make a decision, or to let your baby not be revived for minutes because you're making a decision, but it's that quick prayer. But we're also going to pray that never even happens and you're not in that situation, but just in case. So you can include Bible verses in this. So, cling to God's word, use it as a weapon, even in your prayers. And when you're asking God, like, God, according to, I think it's Jeremiah 33:3, where it says that He will give you He will reveal to you great and mighty things which you do not know. So you could say, Lord, your word says that you'll reveal this to me, and I need it now. So I hope that this was helpful for you, and you can go and find more resources at sierracooke.com. And you will find my course there. Like I said, you'll find my birth video. I missed my actual baby coming out because she came out so fast. I didn't even know she was coming out. So it's like right after she came out is when the video starts. But you can find that at sierracooke.com. And you can find the Facebook community link. So if you want to, be involved in this community, it's a new community as of now. But it's just to connect with other people who are in the same position, because it can be hard, I know from experience, to find people who believe this same thing, who are like, yes, I am going to believe this with you, I'm going to pray this with you, and I am going to also have this as my experience. And that's hard to find sometimes. And then you can also, share testimonials and share, like your actual birth story once it happens, and encourage other people. But along with that, they will encourage you through their stories. So you can find the link for that at sierracooke.com too. And I will talk to you on the next episode.